All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Meredith Malone, and I am the Manager of Programs and Alumni Engagement for Beta Gamma Sigma. This is the first of two panels today as part of the 2024 Beta Gamma Sigma Alumni Network virtual event that will be taking place today. A few housekeeping pieces. Please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from today in the chat. We ask that you stay muted unless you are called upon to ask a question to limit the background noise. We will have an audience Q&A at the for the last part of this event. You can submit any questions in the chat that you have that you would like to ask the panelists during that Q&A at the end of the session. Closed captions are located on the Zoom, and you can turn them on as necessary. And now on to today's panel discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce Murat Oyevetsky. Murat, I apologize for butchering that, of our San Diego area alumni chapter to get us started.
Thank you, Meredith. Well, thank you all for joining us today for discussion on the dynamic intersection of artificial intelligence and the business landscape. So we're very excited to hear from our panelists on this topic. And as Meredith said, my name is Murat Oyevetsky. I know that's a mouthful. And I will be serving as the panel moderator today. I currently serve on the leadership board of the Beta Gamma Sigma San Diego area alumni chapter. So a little bit about myself. I'm a program and project leader with over 20 years of global experience in managing complex portfolios, programs, and projects across diverse industries, more specifically the security industry now. I'm also, I'm so sorry. Meredith, I do apologize. Unexpected. Meredith, can you take over for me for just 1 second? I do apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to introduce our panelists to get the ball rolling. Our first panelist is Dr. Chase Chikati, who has over a decade of experience in financial markets from bases in Singapore, London, and Boston. He has managed the State Street Global Markets North American fiduciary currency sales process before transitioning to private markets and independent research. He has worked intimately with global central banks and institutional investment teams. He continues to advise on geopolitical and currency risk. Dr. Chikati joined Bentley University's finance faculty in January of 2020. He currently teaches history of money, undergraduate and corporate and graduate corporate finance and applied artificial intelligence as part of the Falcon Discovery Seminar. Our second panelist is Madhan Venkatesh. Madhan was born in India and grew up in Malaysia. He studied economics and finance at the University of Nottingham, followed by business analytics and risk management at Johns Hopkins University. He works as a research analyst for Cushman & Wakefield, focusing on industrial real estate. During his studies at JHU, he helped establish the National Student Data Corp, JHU chapter, and was its first vice president. Recently, he was awarded the Employee of the Quarter award by Cushman & Wakefield. Our third panelist today is Erica Driscoll. Erica is the founder and managing director of Driscoll Consulting. Erica's journey through the evolving landscape of human capital, technology, and the future of work is as multifaceted as it is inspiring. With over 15 years at the helm of human resources innovation, she has skillfully navigated diverse industries from healthcare and banking to tech and nonprofit, unearthing the potential within organizations and their people. What truly sets Erica apart is her holistic approach to HR, embracing not just the operational aspects, but the heart and soul of human capital. In her role, Erica has been a catalyst for transformation, employing technology not as an end, but as a means to streamline processes, enhance engagement, and facilitate meaningful connections within the workforce. Her expertise in integrating HR systems is matched by her commitment to diversity, inclusion, and creating a culture where innovation and creativity are celebrated. Whether leading internal communications, orchestrating cultural events, or advocating for work-life harmony, Erica embodies the principles of leadership that resonates deeply in today's complex, ever-changing work environment. Now I will turn it back over to All right, it looks like he's back with us.
I am, and then obviously the work from home aspect is very real, and we truly don't know what can happen at times, so we are definitely live. Thank you, and apologies for the interruption. So let's go ahead and start with AI adoption strategies. So our first question for our panelists: how can business strategically approach the adoption of AI to ensure seamless integration into existing operations? And as a second question, can you share examples of successful AI implementation strategies that have resulted in significant business impact? And I open the discussion to all the panelists.
Sure, I can start off. The first thing I would say is get the data. We've been doing technology transformation for a very long time, and a lot of existing processes have given us a very good literacy in what technology transformation looks like. And this is a great opportunity where, especially in the financial services industry, we're seeing job creation with AI because folks are staffing up on their data fronts in terms of getting more advanced about data analysis with large data sets because the tools have never been better. My former shop, State Street, in the summer of 2023, interviewed over 520 institutional investment teams. And for mid-sized managers, that's defined as between 100 and $500 billion in assets under management. Only 20% had a holistic data strategy. And over 40% of respondents across all classifications said that existing staff lack time to keep on top of the latest tech developments and lack time for training. We have a lot of resources to do this, and that means it's incumbent on businesses to evaluate technology. Everybody's going through this right now. And in many cases, the pricing schedules haven't even been set yet. It is still very early, but testing the technology, understanding what it's strong at, what it's not strong at, where it's strong, where it's weak, is very important in understanding if this sort of technology is right for you. And we're using AI very flippantly. So for these purposes, I'm really talking about generative AI and large language models, but with technology transformations, this is something that culturally we've been doing for a very long time. Clippy is getting very smart, but we've been using robotic process automation and similar things like this for a while, which means we have a vocabulary to address it. So get the data.
I would definitely concur with you, Chase. I think from an HR and a people perspective, there's a little bit of angst going on how can this be used and why is it being used and where can it be used most efficiently and effectively. And just like anything, any project management or change management, it is really essential to kind of build that foundation and your cultural alignment to what that means. So I always share with founders or tech companies that are leveraging AI as tools that providing some of that cultural piece of it as well and what is expected of our employees is really essential, because the way that we will see AI evolve will become very customizable. Each individual organization that leverages or utilizes AI will have different ways in which they use it, or even specific to their organization as an internal process or an internal policy. So those types of things from a foundational perspective are really important to give people direction in what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in utilizing AI. So just like anything else, right, you have to have guidelines as well so that your employees can feel confident in leveraging these tools, because it soon will be like a TI-82, right? Nobody could do calculus by themselves until they found the calculator to do it. LinkedIn is the same way, right? So it will get to know you and get to know an individual, and therefore be that artificial intelligence and a tool that can be used and leveraged by the employee population. But the only way that your employees, your partners, your investors are going to be comfortable with something like that is if there's some clear guidelines around that. So I always recommend starting with your values, right? As an organization, ensuring that your values are clear and all decision making goes back to, right, what do we see as leveraging and utilizing these tools as an asset to our organization?
I work in real estate, and real estate industry is probably one of the slowest industries, one of the slowest major industries to adopt any sort of technology. So when Marat asked the question about adoption of AI to ensure a seamless integration into existing operations, it really got me thinking, because in the same office that I work right now, there are some brokers who actually work with faxes. They fax each other. So like, and we do actually have a faxing machine. So like, that is how slow we are at adoption. So a small blueprint, a very draft blueprint for seamlessly integrating AI into operations would be to assemble a diverse AI task force. And this has to be not just engineers and accountants and technology tech people. It should be like, it should represent the whole industry. So marketing, legal, we should have human resources. All these people should come in together, and they should sort of like speak to each other about, okay, where are the bottlenecks in our organization? What is taking so long? What is what costs the most for us to do? Or in a given employee's workload, what takes up the most amount of time? And can this be something that AI can ease? Is that something that adopting AI could sort of aid rather than substituting like AI for employees? So like integrate it in a way that you work side by side rather than changing fully. And once we have this diverse task force together, then we can use them to they could come up with what is the best way to embed AI into like daily operations or our day-to-day processes, and we could come up with a strategy to adopt it, to monitor it, and make sure that we have a commitment to AI integration moving forward, so that it's not just like a one-time thing where we adopt one process and then 5 years later we are still like, we might be behind. No, it should be, we're doing this now. A year later, we should have like periodic calls. What is out there in the market? What are the AI laws like? All those things. We need to like keep having our tabs on it, keep having tabs on it, have a discussion, and have a discussion on how it can improve the entire organization rather than one or the other aspect of it.
It's very easy for me to completely agree with you, because this is exactly what the university right now is doing in terms of its own response to artificial intelligence. The academic industry had a first knee-jerk reaction with the other AI, which is academic integrity. So plagiarism and all of these sorts of use cases that the technology lends itself very well to. But currently, this semester, the president of the university put together an AI task force where we're doing exactly that. We're bringing in stakeholders from across the university to decide what should an institutional level response start to look like. And for us, there's not necessarily one answer where we actually, so I run a lab that currently has around 30 graduate and undergraduate students working in it, and they do a lot of student tutoring where people come in for a variety of business-facing curriculum discussion questions to make sure that they're comfortable with the content. And it's a peer tutoring service that's very successful. But we trialed AI. We trialed ChatGPT Plus subscriptions with the aim to study whether or not it would work. And we had a successful implementation program because we got the data that said that AI might actually be harming student outcomes. So we banned it. So we've banned ChatGPT from the lab because there's evidence that it might be hurting student outcomes, it's been getting in the way of tutoring. And there's a variety of reasons why that might be. But there's going to be use cases that make sense for this technology and use cases that don't make sense for this technology. So in terms of values, like Eric was talking about, in terms of making sure that any solution or any institutional level framework that you've got, and making sure, as Madan was saying, that you're bringing in stakeholders from across the organization to have a very high level idea of what a policy should look like. You don't calibrate policy based on how the best employees or members of your organization, or even how the most employees or members of your organization are going to handle it. You calibrate policy based on where the vulnerabilities are. And making sure that all the right voices are in that discussion is incredibly important.
I'll
That's
have a little bit of contrarian thinking to share here. So I 100% agree with that you want to bring together multidisciplinary approaches to things and be able to see things holistically from your organization. However, with AI, something that is unique in the AI landscape is that every individual can tailor AI to how they want to use it themselves. So for me, I believe that training and development on the capabilities and the capacities with those boundaries, right, that say this is how our organization thinks, right? So not necessarily policy, but more of guidance and direction to individuals and students, right? I'm dealing with this with my Montessori kids that are, in 5th grade and 7th grade, and they're not allowed to use AI. But guess what? They're doing it anyways, right? So as much as we try to ban things or we'll try to say, right, this is how we do it, the evolution of AI is really an individual journey, right? And the way that we use it and how we use it, I think is more important than putting parameters in place because it's going to change so quickly, right? So the task forces that we might put together, we may be behind, even if it's even if we're meeting monthly or quarterly, right? So those types of things are changing so quickly, and we're at this catalyst of change and change management that coming back to the why, the content and the data is out there. So to go back to, right, your piece that you had shared, Chase, about data and data integrity and ensuring that all of the inputs that are coming in are consistent. We need to teach our students and our employees and our kids that there are many different lenses to see things through. So being able to dive deeper and wider is essential. But if we're going to try to policy it out of existence, I will say that we'll have a revolution on our hands.
This is a fantastic discussion. It's the right discussion to have because there's so much cultural buy-in. Everyone's having so much fun talking about AI because functional AI is here in our lifetimes, and we've been debating this as a culture for so long that you don't need to convince people to care about it. So the quality of this discussion is always very high. I would also say that it's good to remember that there do exist classes of technology that we as a culture have a mechanism to say we're going to leave this on the table. Things like human-animal hybrid and genetic testing, technologies like nuclear technology, which is very heavily regulated. We do have a cultural mechanism to talk about technology, acknowledging that taking science too far can produce disastrous results, which was the experience of the 20th century. So this is one of those discussions, particularly because so many stakeholders are involved now. The value discussion is a very important one. We're not seeing job destruction yet, where we're seeing folks build out data functions, build out staffing up to make sure that they can handle better data transformation processes because we've got better tools now. We are seeing it to an extent in the coding industry because the technology is by coders for coders. It's trained on very high quality information there. So that's where we're seeing, that's also where I use it the most. ChatGPT is my research assistant. But there are mechanisms that we have to police it because ultimately, even though regulation is backward looking, culturally, we have done this before and we have been able to put the reins on industry while still integrating it into our lives.
So this is a really good segue as well, because as Chase mentioned too, with students using this, there could be potential impact to creativity. And this is a fantastic segue into innovation and disruption as well. So how do you foresee AI continuing to disrupt traditional business models, and what opportunities does this present for forward-thinking organizations? And as a companion question, are there any challenges or pitfalls businesses should be aware of when navigating AI-driven innovation?
Well, okay, right now, AI has a difficult time completing common sense questions, but what it is really good at right now is that it is really, really good at processing and analyzing troves of data much faster than human brains could do. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are Vistra, who's a major power producer in the US, and it has plants that operate quite efficiently, but you have to monitor hundreds of different indicators. You have to track temperatures, pressure, oxygen levels, pumps, fans, and you have to make adjustments in real time to avoid any accidents. So if you use AI, if you have the help of AI, you could reduce the amount of complexity. You could sort of like give it over to AI. You could sort of it will be a much better skilled operator at it. So in this scenario, I know that we would be taking control away from folks that traditionally had it and would be giving it up to AI. But on the flip side, you would also avoid accidents. You would also increase efficiency and lower emissions, etc. So yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think
yeah,
there's no one silver bullet, but if
right.
when we're to design a silver bullet, it would be education and making sure that folks understand what the technology is good at and how it can help. There are a lot of misconceptions that still exist about the nature of this technology, where the marketing is such that it's posited as a Google killer in terms of a new search function, but ultimately it's not running an information retrieval system. That's not how the process works. It's running a statistical process. And clearing up those sorts of misconceptions in terms of presenting folks with the technology so they can understand it, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum in terms of using it for very complex processes or using it for day to day. The first step is getting people to understand where it's strong, where it's weak. And that's an educational process that's happening right now. It's happening relatively slowly at the institutional level because institutions still largely can't play with it because the pricing models haven't been set yet. And building your own is an incredibly capital and energy intensive project. So not that many folks can do that sort of work. So it's still very early, but it's the perfect time to be engaging with folks about understanding what it can be used for and the sorts of things where it can be set up to fail. And we've already seen folks get in a lot of trouble for using it poorly. And we're starting to understand more generally some of those risks, but that's an educational process. And we're in the beginning of what's going to be a very messy next few years of integrating this.
I would
This
agree with
reminds.
that.
I'm
Yes,
so
it's going to
sorry,
be a
Eric.
messy few years for sure. In regards to the training and development side of things, I think that that is critical because one of the things that I fear is that people will use it or companies will use it or investors will leverage it or invest into it purely for the job killing function of it. And to me, I don't feel like those conversations should even run hand in hand, right? It's not about reducing the amount of people in your workforce. It's about increasing their outputs, right? And enabling more access to more information and more data at a time where as humans, we can only process a certain amount within a certain time, right? We have our 8-hour workday, which will probably change as well with the advent of AI and work schedules and how we're working. But moving from that blue collar workforce to more knowledge workforce, right, has been happening, right, in AI for a very long time, and even robotics, and the car industry and things like that. So it's not necessarily, to me, a conversation about how do we replace jobs. It's how do we optimize people's experience in their job setting so that they are more balanced, right, in their relationships, in their life, in their work, and have the ability to leverage a tool, right? Going back to the TI-82, right? We could, if we were trying to do hand calculus, it would take us 10 times longer than just putting the formula, but you still need to know the formula, and you still need to know the foundation. You still need to know how to write and how to structure sentences and how to build prompts. So those things on the how and the why, combining those together, I believe is the one silver bullet, right? Is teaching people that they can think in a different way and enable these as tools, not as replacements.
Right. So right now, tech companies are doing well, but interest rate is like 7%, and commercial real estate is sort of like at a standstill. So we need to improve efficiency. We need to cut operating costs. We need to do things to survive the next decade. And using artificial intelligence for data search, for internet search, generating leads as like a digital personal assistant, Hey Siri and sorry, my phone started up. Alexa, all those things. They can help. They can definitely they can displace some jobs, but as far as never reducing jobs, never cutting jobs, or thinking about it in a different way. The only way that I see that we could move forward with both increasing efficiency and increasing and retaining talent and retaining employees is we have to like definitely increase their knowledge. If not, if what they're doing right now is outdated, we need to teach them. We need to increase their skill set to something that we want them to do. For example, if we do not need administrators and we need more marketing people, people who could, we need to show them how to do it. We need to help them transfer their knowledge into something else. Other than that, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be, yeah. We will speak more about that when we go to ethics, but when we have that ethics conversation. But we are definitely going to have to like cut jobs. You're going to have to. It's part of like decreasing your operating costs and increasing your efficiency, like being more nimble, being more flexible in the way that you operate.
Well, AIs aren't necessarily innovative, right? They're only taking information that is input into them. So just like anything else, the data that goes in is the data that comes out. So
Right,
I
but
think
it
that there
costs
is a
much
challenge
cheaper.
with that groupthink mentality as well too, right? Is how do you drive innovation and drive new ways of doing things if you're so stuck in using the tool as a data gatherer of prior information that's already out there. So there is that cap as well too, where people and knowledge workers will certainly need to have that creativity to think outside of the box and leverage, right, what we've learned in the past and what we already know, but also have new ideas to input into the systems.
This is exactly where my nervousness with AI really hits hardest, where we worry about the loss of foundational skills and the dissociation from the learning process. And as you said, you need to understand what a good quality question is and what a good quality answer looks like to protect yourself from the machine doing something silly, because machines will do exactly what you told it to do and not one thing more. And where we're seeing this technology potentially disrupting in a very negative way learning is along ley lines that have already come under immense stress from the twin blights of COVID-19 and social media, that we have been seeing a dissociation from the learning process, and we're worrying about mental atrophy and how these tools might magnify that. Now, I'm going to caveat that by saying I'm not worried about the United States. Yes, there are learning issues, but we're at 80%, sorry, the dark, literally, this is a great metaphor. It's a motion-based. But
AI.
this is an 80% services economy. We've managed a transition away from industry and manufacturing, and we have the lowest out of the G7 sensitivity to trade in terms of GDP. So we are a massively inward-facing economy with 100,000 person stadiums for college football, and we've done large-scale technology transformation and job transformations before, where classes of work left the States and never came back. The places where I do get very worried about are the places that historically don't weather populism very well and don't weather these technology changes very well, and that's mainly Europe. China is an AI leader, where 40% of research over the past 20 years regarding intelligent tutoring systems has come out of mainland China. And they are incredibly focused on making sure that their workforce is employed because that's their one big political issue. That's their mandate. So they have moved to restrict this technology already because that's their main stakeholder group. So there are areas where it's valid to be very nervous at scale in terms of some of these technology transformations and how it affects culture. The United States typically does this sort of thing well, though. We are very good at retraining, even though we many times treat the US consumer like a giant petri dish. We have a backward facing regulatory cycle that has had the tendency over these changes to do its job. So, yes, I'm extremely nervous about AI replacing knowledge instead of enhancing knowledge, because internet technologies, even though they have done an amazing job at democratizing information, they've also had the tendency to exacerbate inequality in sometimes surprising ways. So yes, I'm worried about that here. Broadly speaking, culturally, the US has all the tools it needs, in my view, to get it right.
And as we approach that slippery slope, this is a fantastic segue into ethical considerations. So how can businesses balance the ethical considerations of AI deployment, in particular in areas like data privacy and bias and transparency? And what role do corporate responsibility and ethical AI practices play in shaping the strategic decisions of organizations that use those AI technologies?
Next.
Open to the entire panel.
On the first question, I mentioned a task force, that would come together and take a holistic view about AI before moving forward with implementation. And this is sort of like a good reason why that should happen. In the planning phase of an AI implementation in a company, especially something like real estate, which does not have a lot of that, we would sort of like create parameters. We would say, hey, this is what we want to do. These are the stakeholders. We want to make sure that we want to ensure that we are responsible, we are ethical, we are within the bounds of local laws and international laws regarding privacy, regarding transparency, and everything. So like we have to create parameters before we push the trigger into implementation so that people don't run away with it. Okay, let me give you an example of one way things were used, AI was used poorly. A Florida-based realty company used something called robocalls. So basically, realtors, one way that they reach out to clients or get clients is they basically pick up their phone and cold call 8 hours a day. They can cold call, or they can do something called robocall, where 500 calls are done using AI simultaneously or within few minutes. So in this scenario, it really brings up an ethical question, whether you should do it or not. And also, when you're calling one by one, you don't really disturb a lot of people. But when 100,000 realtors in Southern California suddenly start to do 500 robocalls each every single day, you're going to have a lot of calls in your inbox, a lot of voice calls. You're going to have a lot of messages. You're going to be bombarded with people every single day. So in that same realty company, for example, if the top management says, hey, we are implementing AI, but these are the parameters, these are things that you can do, these are things that you cannot do, and then you have a legal framework within the company, sort of like a core values, vision, mission, core values sort of thing, to sort of say, okay, these are what we stand for, these are things that we'll do, things are things that we will not do, so that customers know that, okay, we know exactly where we stand with them, we know exactly how they are performing, how they are implementing their AI, what their policies are, and we know that they're not gonna cross it. And this also sort of prevents government from coming in with new laws. If we manage ourselves well, then the government doesn't have to do not have a need to come in and do that. But if we manage ourselves poorly, which unfortunately in few instances have been the case, then the only way we can responsibly move forward is if Congress or the government comes in and says, hey, these are things that you have to follow. These are privacy laws that you have to follow. These are transparency things, rules that you have to follow, so that we don't have a tech version of the 2007 financial crisis.
There's a mini discussion going on in the chat regarding ethics in politics as well too. Michael Wood says, I'm hearing a lot about industry, academia, and business, but not much about political will to regulate. Government is often slow to react, but will eventually have to get involved, possibly interfering with industry's desire to innovate. I would agree with that. And I would also agree with you, Madhan, that it's really important to put those frameworks in place. Actually, Amazon, right, has a decision-making framework that they built, and no matter which department or which organization you're in the Amazon ecosystem, you know what you're able to do as an individual and what you need to leverage others to decide, right, as well too. So having that and contrarian thinking, having strengths-based leadership where you're not hiring or bringing people into a group that all have similar thoughts, ideas, and experiences is essential. So that's part of diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, is really making those strategic decisions as an organization to hold yourself accountable and to hold people in your organization accountable for how your organization wants to work. If we hold ourselves accountable, then we have the ability, right, to influence how those outcomes come into play, and therefore politics and ethics as well too. So if an organization is able to go back to that value proposition as an employee, back to their values as an organization, and really define that decision-making framework, it really ties well to the individuality that will drive AI and drive that innovation as well too. So I holistically believe in starting at that foundation, right? If you don't have a solid foundation, you're going to end up with a landslide. So it's very important to go back to the basics with your people and your organization, define what that looks like, those parameters and that framework, so that people can make individual decisions and feel a sense of psychological safety as well too in the decisions that they make, because they know they were able to meet the guidelines. They can justify their decisions as well too if they're cornered about it, or if something goes wrong, then at least that person can go back and reference to the framework and say, here are the steps that I took to make this decision, because we will all be needing to make more decisions. A top-down leadership style is just non-existent in today's evolving industry. So I really believe in setting those foundations and frameworks.
This is why I'm most optimistic about the AI conversation, frankly, is the political dimension and the leadership question that you mentioned, is you need free markets and free democracy simultaneously. They have to exist simultaneously, because if one breaks, then you just go back to aristocracy in terms of how to allocate resources and decide what gets built. And the scariest thing about internet technologies is that they sit on top of both of those pedals, where creating monopolistic conditions that also incentivize reality curation machines starts to erode people's ability to make informed decisions. And artificial intelligence is coming at exactly the right time, where I don't think it's too mysterious that we're seeing a lot of social media regulation around this point, because I view that as a perfect attack vector to get people really invested in their constitutionally protected right to privacy, which it's taken 20 years of social media for folks to really start to care about the information brokerage economy. And because you have so much cultural buy into artificial intelligence, and because ultimately it is an internet technology, and some of those monetization discussions are actively happening as folks try to scale, it's a great opportunity to fix what has been a very big problem that we haven't had a lot of political capital to fix. So because there's so much active interest in AI, and because it intersects with a lot of these very important issues that have been going on for a very long time, it's the perfect time. And I think that we will see a lot of regulation come in, because this is the sort of issue that politicians find it very easy to talk about. So I'm very optimistic that we are going to get a lot of very proactive, sensible regulation, because the literacy rate in this topic is so high, and because it touches a lot of other very important issues there simultaneously. So this is why I think the States is going to be fine, because we do have a good cultural mechanism that, yes, even though it is backwards looking, this is how it functions best.
And Chase, I don't know if you're doing such a good job with queuing me up, but you've just queued me up for future trends. So let's talk about future trends. So what emerging trends do you anticipate will have a significant impact on the strategic use of AI in business landscape, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years? And how can businesses stay ahead of that curve and adapt to rapidly evolving AI technologies and trends?
I'll just jump in again quickly here, because it's one word for me, which is cybersecurity. This is where, yes, in the early days, we did see people get in trouble for passing off AI work as their own and subjecting themselves to hallucinations. But where folks in the financial services industry in particular got into lots of trouble was getting the proper handling of customer data and throwing it into machines part wrong. And in our industry, we have federally protected student privacy issues where we need to be extremely careful about handling student data. And lots of industries have the sensitivities too. And where these issues for business really come to the fore is with the cybersecurity team, making sure that people understand the technology to not put themselves and their institution and their customers at risk. So that's where we will see a lot of active investment in industry in managing some of the risks of these developments as the technology gets better, as the computing power becomes more democratized itself. For me, it's cybersecurity. That's going to be the big investment in industry as they react to AI.
For me, a couple of trends that are going to emerge in the next 5 years would probably be laws. We touched on it in last question, but we are probably going to have a lot more laws from the government, both locally and internationally. And also, I think there's going to be a fair bit of human AI teaming. So basically, you're no longer just functioning on your own. Most of the things that you do, at least AI helps you, or it helps you function in a way that you want to function. I have an Apple Watch, so this helps me find out how much I have walked, how much I need to walk. I'm trying to lose weight, so it helps me set goals. It helps me stick to that goal, and it tells me if I don't move for 1 hour, it tells me maybe stand up and move for 1 minute and come back. It helps me work in a way that I want to work at. For example, another example of mine would be while typing an email or creating marketing material to send to our clients, if we want it to sound as a way, like we want to definitely capture some statistics. We want to capture low vacancy or high low supply rates and high demand, things like that. We want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the hundreds of other stats that we are throwing at the clients. We want to make sure that these ones stick out, and AI helps. It helps put marketing materials together in a way that we want it to. It helps us type emails in a way that would emphasize something that we want to emphasize. So it will aid us rather than So in the near future, that is something that would happen, teaming up rather than fully taking over whatever I do.
Would agree with that. I think from my perspective, the biggest trend that I'm seeing and have seen over the last few years, as well as what I anticipate will happen in the next 3 to 5 years, is really an explosion of the gig economy, right? So we're seeing that in technology platforms like Upwork and other tech spaces. Fractional work, that's a new buzzword within, right, talent and within human resources. And I really see that evolving due to leveraging AI as tools. And again, like what you were saying, was using that as a companion or as a partner in your work. From a gig economy perspective, I really see this happening in various high-tech organizations like Meta and Amazon, any of those big 5 organizations. And it's really paying for the output as opposed to paying for the hours, right? So if you can define project scopes and have high-level employees that can zoom in and zoom out within your organization and have a real specialty, that gig economy will really enable people to be able to balance their work and their life as well, because we can do things so much faster, right? So leveraging that as a tool and enabling people, right, to define what those parameters look like, define what the project and the outcome, those OKRs, look like for an organization, can really enable organizations to zero in on what it is they need to get done and then find the right person and the right skill set that is enabled to do that. Because each one of us, how our AI technologies evolve for us individually is different than how it will evolve for you. So for example, I can use AI like a ChatGPT for 6 months, and that ChatGPT will learn me, right? And how I use that and what my vernacular is and what my style is. Same thing back in the day with LinkedIn. When I, as an HR professional, was looking for talent, I would also leverage the hiring manager to do a search, because in that search, we could search the same exact Boolean keywords and strings and get different outputs because we had different networks, different first, second, and third degree connections. So those type of outputs that come will be customized more and more to who we are as an individual. I see that as a trend where companies will be leveraging and having thousands of internal AI agents, right, that will be leveraged for their employees and for those individuals. I'm hoping and am hopeful that that will also create longevity within roles and driven skill sets based on strengths, right? Because somebody's strengths are going to inherently be driven into those prompts, into those conversations, into the outputs. And therefore, they can be even more specialized as an individual and what their worldview is, their experience in bringing those things into those outputs.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to segue over to Meredith for some Q&A from our participants.
Thank you. We have a bunch of questions. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them, but we will do our best to make this a speed round Q&A with our panelists. So the first one was from Josh Olson. His comment and question is, I've heard of a company that turned on Copilot in their Office apps. One employee asked AI to give him a list of all chats his name was mentioned. He got back all messages, even negative ones about him that others said privately. The IT team said they had the privacy settings on and it still happened. Any ideas or on when we could see these types of issues worked out and avoid some of these near-term pitfalls? And then PS, company then shut off Copilot for concerns about privacy between companies. So
Sure. One of the best ways to protect your organization from issues like this is to not give the AI certain data, to limit the amount of data that you expose it to, because in terms of the control problem, where machines do some things that you didn't expect them to do, where you want a machine to do exactly what you want to do and not one thing more, with any issues of sensitive data, while there are a number of tools that are already existing and are being rapidly developed for AIs to manage themselves and to have various oversight functions, not setting it up to fail to begin with is one of the most important tools that exists that we know how to process, where information classification is something we've been doing for a long time, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel with it. So in terms of protecting your organizations, making sure that your cybersecurity team is involved with all decisions about what's shared with a chatbot, and then going through proper testing to make sure that it does exactly what it's intended to do. You don't start with throwing it sensitive information. So making sure that those information security classifications are already the case. This is an area where a lot of businesses are getting up to speed with that. And if AI is a change agent, then I think that's a very healthy process for businesses to go through to begin with, because this is where you can burn a lot of trust and get into a lot of regulatory trouble with your regulator, with your customers. So that's the area where I would suggest moving the slowest. Anytime you're dealing with sensitive information, that's where there's a lot of room for things to break.
All right, Mahan or Erica, anything you want to add on that question?
No.
Okay. Next question is, before your organization implemented AI, what kind of governance structure was required? And who are the key decision makers over your organizational governance as responsible to monitor AI?
I think that's something we kind of addressed in our conversation in regards to putting together the policies, procedures, frameworks, and just the knowledge groups around that. When it comes to who is responsible, certainly, right, the CEO should be always involved in the execution. They are typically the visionary of an organization. I think HR, strategy, marketing, all of those organizations should be involved in ensuring that they are monitoring and evaluating how their employees are using it. But ultimately, I think in any company, right, the technology officer and their teams and having a specialized team that is keeping up on those trends is essential as well, because this is evolving on a weekly basis.
Okay. Erica, this one will probably go to you, but Chase or Madhan, feel free to chime in as well. As you move to gig economy, how do you address benefits like 401k and healthcare? Will many workers lose those benefits, and how would you address those shortcomings in gig work versus traditional work?
That's a great question and a good concern to have. I do believe that is a very US-based problem because of how our healthcare system is designed. Many other countries are a few steps ahead of the US in regards to how they support healthcare for their populations. When it comes to 401ks and other savings plans, they will likely go the way of pensions, which is that the individual is more responsible for those types of platforms and plans. However, I think there will be a need from a political perspective and a financial perspective to increase the ability to leverage those dollars and save on taxes and be able to defer compensation and those types of things for those specific savings plans like HSAs, FSAs, 401ks, and enable employees to be able to use those dollars in a way that is more customized for themselves and their particular situation. I've actually worked with a couple of different organizations to build in benefits plans that are more a la carte, where they say, okay, we are going to invest this X amount of dollars into our employees, but you can choose whether to invest it into a 401k or you can choose to pay off your student loans with that. Where are you in your life, and what is most valuable to you as an individual? So I do believe that healthcare workers will lose the benefits in a traditional fashion, but hopefully there is a transition into more customizable packages and enable the tax benefits and federal benefits that you would get from that in the US. In other countries, those are already in process.
So I actually disagree with the vision of a very lush and standardized gig economy, partly for this reason, but also whenever countries or companies or large organizations try to scale central management via some sort of automated process, one of the first things that always has to happen is free movement to labor stops, where people stop moving. They're told to be in place. And the reason for that is because people are too complicated. That as soon as people start moving around, as people start changing cities, changing jobs, as soon as their interests change, the math starts to break. And centralized economies for that reason are enormously inefficient. And the marketplaces where we have seen attempts to do this sort of large scale centralization and marketplace formatting is real estate, where the financial services industry still cannot model house inflation. And Zillow has tried, but it cannot fully model the real estate market because no two houses are the same. And the human marketplace just isn't that efficient. So these sorts of very, and I don't think that that's, by the way, something that's going to go away as a trend, because there's a lot of incentive for large technology players to want something like that. But I think for employers themselves, they would find that work would just slow down to nothing, where the human condition lends itself to a bit too much chaos for something like that to not hinder the creative process and also not hinder the functional productive process too. So I'm a little bit on a different side with that. And for me, the real estate market, and Madan, you could probably talk this way. You can talk about this way better than I can. But in terms of the real estate experience, about how difficult it is to centrally organize as large human marketplaces, I think that that's I don't see as much places where cultures do tend more towards socialism, like in Europe and in East Asia. That's where I could see models like that coming into place. But the U.S. historically has been very averse to large socialist models.
Funny you should say that, just because one of the first things that real estate companies started using AI in was actually wading through census data to find out where people were moving, and if we should move geographically from one area to another where people are moving, so that we can find more value there. I mean, real estate is not very difficult. I mean, to value, to do things like that. It's not. It's somewhat straightforward when it comes to finding out how much you can, like, what the profitability is and what it is actually worth. But creating value, finding out 10 years from now, is it going to be worth as much as it is today? Those sort of questions are more important, and it is very difficult to find answers for those sort of questions. And we're still working with the census. We're still working with that sort of, and wading through that and trying to find some sense of some patterns from that. But yeah, it's still a little bit. People are unpredictable. People are difficult to find out. We do not know why people move, and or at least no two reasons are the same. Yeah, that's all I can add to that.
All right, well, since we are at 1:30, so we have reached our time limit. So I will just say thank you to everyone for joining us today, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening where you're at. Thank you to our panelists and our moderator for this great discussion. So hopefully we'll see you guys all again soon. And we wish you a great rest of your day. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Feel free to connect on LinkedIn.